Welcome to the channel, my name is Saul. We're doing more subsets today. Now, I made a game, I called it the Summoner's Nexus TCG, and I'm getting ready to release it. Leading up to the release, I'm sharing information about the game to get people invested, get people interested, and just like help you know more about it. So if the idea of a brand new TCG sounds good to you, subscribe so you can find out more about the development as it continues. You can join our Discord to get more information, and leave a like so that more people find the video. Now, Glass Half Full, aka the Asylum subset. Now, this is a major subset of cards, but it is the smallest major subset of cards, so much so that it's almost a minor subset. Now, major subsets are what your decks are supposed to be composed of. They're like the bulk of your strategy, whereas the minor subsets are the ones that just sort of slot in, they're the interchangeable things that give you more deck building variety. Now, the Asylum subset is literally on the edge because the smallest that a major subset can be is 5 cards. Now, the reason for that is because there's this thing called the synergy system that sort of refines and locks down how the major subsets can be played. The higher the synergy rating of any given card, the less other things can be played. You've got 10 slots for avatars in your deck, so if my synergy rating is 8, I've only got space for 2 more cards in that deck. The Asylum subset has a synergy rating of 5, which means that you could play like a full other subset in this, potentially a major one. Now, in terms of what went into the design of this subset, it was a lot of different things. This was a character-based deck in that I came up with a character for the story that this game is based on, and when designing that character, I know that they had like sort of a, I don't want to say soulless, but like a very bleak outlook. And so it needed to be a very negative themed, let's call it perspective. And so the deck sort of reflects that. It's a very dark, dystopian kind of deck. So the thing about these cards is they are all based on assets from the Unity asset store. This game was initially going to be a 3D project. And so I was purchasing 3D assets to save on costs because I'm an indie developer. And I was having cards made adjacent to those assets. So it's like, okay, it's a unique card, but you can tell that it's based on that asset, so when you see them together in game, it makes sense. When the game stopped being a 3D project, well, we just sort of stopped basing things off of assets, but this deck had already been created. Now, those assets weren't part of the same pack. They were all like individual things that I just felt had a similar enough vibe that I could combine them. So like they were all separated. You've got Osiris, which is like sort of linked to Egyptian mythology, which some of the other cards that exist in this subset also are. These aren't the only cards in the subset. They all have this low synergy rating, but the other ones I decided were better served to be like released down the line, because since this deck has such a low synergy rating, you can break that up and like allow people to get familiar with this base deck and then add in more cards and then more support later on. That way the deck is able to stay relevant as the meta evolves. Those newer cards can have their effects updated before they're added into the game to make them like meta relevant. The theme with this deck is to do with like dying in the undead, and so it is very, very, very like control oriented. The whole point of this deck is that it locks down the graveyard and also potentially sometimes locks down the Nexus, which is a safe zone where monsters are stored. So they have like really good control effects. Like, okay, hey, you can cut everything, like move everything that's in the Nexus out. Or more importantly, there is, I think there are 2 effects, right? This little cute dog, which is, I love his design. He's one of my favorite cards. He has the effect that while he's on the field, you just can't move cards out of the graveyard. Like they are stuck there. So any card that would return a card from the graveyard back to the hand or summon a card from the graveyard just doesn't work. And why that's so good is because a lot of cards like that are runes, right? Runes are the magic cards of this game, and they can only be used on the turn where they are set. If you don't get an opportunity to use them on that turn, they just go to the graveyard. You can't use them anymore. So let's say your opponent tries to activate a rune to get some cards back, and you've got this on the field, you activate this effect, it's that rune is useless. Either they don't activate it or they try to and it fails, but then it's going to go to the graveyard at the end of the turn anyway. So it's a really strong effect. The takeaway from this, the takeaway from all of this is that if a single one of these cards dies, all of them explode immediately. They just all blow themselves up. It's a passive effect. This is, I mean, it's a balancing mechanic and also just like a way of experimenting with putting passive effects into the game. But yeah, that is, it doesn't say it on the card, on any of the card effects. What it's going to have is there's going to be a little line of text that goes underneath the card here and sort of just explains, oh, hey, if any Asylum avatar is sent to the graveyard while this card is on the field, destroy this card. And so the playstyle revolves around not you get such strong control effects, but the caveat is if you lose even a single card, the whole strategy falls apart. And so it's about trying to strategize, maintain those control effects while also preventing your own destruction in the process. So you're meant to combine this with another subset and use that subset's strengths to try and circumvent some of this deck's weaknesses. But you may notice that this deck has more runes at its disposal than any other major subset in the game currently, even more than the Wandering subset, which is like the premier deck of the game. And the reason for that is, well, if the monsters die all collectively, if one of them even goes out, the effects that you want to try and use to keep you alive probably shouldn't be monster effects. So all of the runes have different things that they do to try and prevent the destruction of the monsters, or to make it so that you don't have to experience the downside when one of them is destroyed. And why I like that they're runes is because it means you can only do each of those things once. So if you, let's say it's turn 3 or turn 4, and you've used up your runes, that's it. You just have to try and survive on your own. And they don't do things that are too crazy. Like, for example, one of them says, oh, if a card is about to be destroyed, send that card to the graveyard instead. So you still lose that card, and you lose another card on top of it, but you don't have to pay the cost of having everything get destroyed. So this was a very fun deck to try and balance. I may have overtuned them because I genuinely thought that they were going to be a lot stronger, but no one has really seemed to take to them in testing, and I think that's partially because there aren't that many effects right now that revolve around getting things out of the graveyard. There's more than when this deck was initially created, but this is a kind of deck I personally feel will come in and out of the meta as graveyard dependent strategies emerge in the game, so I'm actually not too keen to buff them right now. I'm happy to leave them where they're at. Not to mention they're gonna get more cards. Like this monster, this is their boss monster, but she's not actually the boss monster. Their boss monster is a card called Anubis, who is much stronger than she is, so I don't think they need any help. Another interesting thing that went into the design of all of these cards is that I made them all dual type, where they are assault and defense oriented, because if the whole thing is, oh, if one of us dies, we all die, best to make it so that you can be as versatile as you want to be, so they all have equal attack and defense. If you've got 100 attack, you automatically also have 100 defense, which means that their boss monster has the same stats as the Wandering Ryu, which is pretty good. So they are, I mean, hopefully going to be survivable enough to be relevant in the early stages of the game, but even if they're not relevant in the early stages of the game, I'm certain that this deck is going to get its chance to shine eventually. So yeah, that is everything on the Asylum subset. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, again, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a like because it really helps us out, and stay tuned for more news on the game as development continues. I can't wait to have you play it. I've been Saul, and goodbye, friends.